Welcome to the deep dive. If you're getting ready for the IELTS exam, and especially if you're really aiming high, for that band 9, you probably realize mastery isn't just about knowing big words or complicated sentence structures. So much of it comes down to the tiny words, getting them absolutely right. Precision. And today we're doing a massive deep dive into prepositions. They're like the glue holding English together, aren't they? And honestly, they often decide if your speaking and writing sound, well, fluent, natural, really idiomatic.
Oh, absolutely. They really are the sort of unsung heroes or maybe architects of making sense. It's funny, a lot of advanced learners kind of gloss over them, think they're simple connectors. But for Band 9, no way. The examiner is looking for more than just range. They need to see accuracy, control, and misusing a preposition, say, picking in when it should be at, or maybe sticking to simple words when a more complex phrase fits better.
Yeah, that signals something, doesn't it?
It really does. It's not just about the meaning, though that can get confused too. It signals, quite directly, a lack of that deep idiomatic command. And that hits your score hard, across all 4 modules, actually.
Right. So our mission today, it's very focused. We're definitely moving past the basic, like the cat is on the mat. We've got some great source material here. It covers, well, pretty much everything, how prepositions are structured, a whole list of common ones, over 100 grouped by what they do, their function. And maybe most importantly, it dives into those really tricky exceptions, the confusing pairs that can trip you up, the landmines in speaking and writing. We want you to get past the guesswork, start using these little words with real confidence.
Exactly. And the core question we're chasing is, why? Why are they so important for IELTS? It boils down to this. Using them correctly shows precision, lexical precision, grammatical control. When an examiner hears or reads language that sounds natural and precise, what they're often recognizing is your perfect handling of these functional words, the ones that pin down time, place, cause, relationships, everything really. That's often the gap between a solid band 7 and that top-tier band 9.
Flawless application. That's the goal. Okay, so to get there, we need to know our tools, right? Structurally speak. Okay, let's unpack this. Starting with those fundamental building blocks, the 4 structural types of prepositions.
Yeah, understanding the structure of the different types, it's actually quite strategic for IELTS. It's not just about memorizing lists. Knowing the types helps you vary your language, your sentence structures, and that variety. That's key for the grammatical range score. You need to show you could use more than just the simple single-word ones.
Right, it's like having a full toolkit instead of just a hammer. So let's start with the absolute basics, simple prepositions. These are the ones everyone learns first. Single words like in, on, at, by, for, from, to, with, of, under, over, they're everywhere.
They are the workhorses, definitely. They set up those fundamental relationships. Location is a big one. Like for inside something enclosed, I live in Dhaka. On for a surface, the book is on the table. And if for, well, a specific point or maybe a more general location, she's at school. But here's the thing. If you only use these, you're kind of limiting how complex and nuanced your language can be. You hit a ceiling.
Okay, so how do we raise that ceiling? The second type helps here, compound prepositions. These are where we start combining simple prepositions with other words, right? And they often add a clearer sense of movement or maybe a more formal reason, thinking of words like into, onto, out of, because of, due to, instead of.
Exactly. And that combination immediately brings more nuance. Let's take an example. Compare he walked in the room versus he went into the room. They're similar, but different. He walked in the room could mean he was already inside, just walking around. But into the room clearly shows the action of entering, moving from outside to inside. That directionality is crucial.
Ah, I see. Especially for things like writing task 1, describing a process or movement on a graph.
Precisely. Describing how something moves from one stage into another, or how figures climb onto a certain level. That precision matters. And let's look at the cause ones you mentioned. Because of and due to. This is a common confusion point.
Yeah, they seem similar, but are they interchangeable?
Not quite, especially in terms of formality. Because of is generally more common in everyday speech, maybe slightly more casual, like we had to cancel the picnic because of the rain. Simple cause and effect. Due to tends to feel a bit more formal. It's often used after the verb to be or linked directly to a noun. For example, the flight cancellation was due to unforeseen technical problems, or delays due to fog are common. Using due to correctly in, say, an essay about causes and effects, that instantly lifts the formal tone.
Okay, so it's about choosing the right tool for the level of formality you need. That makes sense.
It really is. Showing you understand that functional difference, that due to signals a more formal cause, is a definite plus.
Right. Now things get even more complex, I imagine. The next category, phrasal prepositions or prepositional phrases. These are groups of words acting like one single preposition, right? Things like in front of, in spite of, on behalf of, by means of, in accordance with.
Yes, and these are gold dust for IELTS, especially, as the source material points out, for writing task 2 and speaking part 3. Why? Because they naturally let you build more complex sentences and express sophisticated ideas like contrast or representation.
How so? Give us an example.
Okay, think about showing contrast. You could use a simple word like although or but. Although it rained, we played football. Fine, but basic. Now use a phrasal preposition. In spite of the rain, we played football. It achieves the same contrast, but the sentence structure feels more advanced. It uses a prepositional phrase to set up the contrast rather than just a simple conjunction.
Ah, okay, so it adds grammatical variety and sophistication just by choosing that structure.
Exactly. Or think about representation in a formal context. Instead of saying, I'm speaking for the team, which is okay conversationally, in a formal setting or in writing, you'd say, on behalf of the team, I'd like to thank you. It conveys that official capacity much more effectively. These phrases, like by means of or in accordance with, are signals to the examiner that you have a wide grammatical range and can handle formal register. They boost your score.
Got it. These seem really useful for adding that academic flavor, and that leads us to the last type.
The last structural type, yes. Participial prepositions. These are a bit more specialized, often derived from verbs, usually ending in ing, or sometimes ed. Think of words like concerning, considering, following, regarding, notwithstanding, given. You see them a lot in formal writing or academic texts.
Okay, so concerning instead of just about.
Precisely. That's the instant formality switch. Imagine you're writing a formal email or report. Saying, I have a question about your visa is fine for informal chat, but I have a question regarding your visa application, or even this email is concerning your recent inquiry. Sounds much more professional, more official.
Right, and using something like considering.
Yeah, considering is great for introducing a factor that influences a decision or situation. Instead of a simple, because the economy is unstable, well, you could write, considering the current economic instability, the company decided to postpone the expansion. It frames the reason in a more analytical, formal way. Using these participial prepositions shows a really high level of linguistic awareness. It tells the examiner you know how to adjust your language for context and purpose, non-negotiable for Band 9.
So it's about knowing these different structures exist, simple, compound, phrasal, participial, and then deploying them strategically to show off your range.
That's the core idea. Build that toolkit.
Oh. Okay, so we've got the structures down. Simple, compound, phrasal, participial. But knowing the structure isn't enough, right? We need to know what they do, their function. Because one little word, like at, can signal time or place, or even like the target of an action. Our materials list over 100 common prepositions, and grouping them by function seems way more practical than just trying to memorize them all individually.
Oh, much more practical. And what's fascinating here is how these tiny words completely shift the meaning depending on their function. Take by, for instance. It could mean next to, stand by the window, or the method, travel by train, or a deadline, finish by Monday. If you understand the functional categories time, place, direction, cause, means, etc., you can decode the sentence's intention much faster. Hashtag 2.1, time and duration, the temporal framework.
Right. Let's dive into the first big functional group and probably the trickiest, time and duration. This is where we find that infamous trio, at, on, in. They cause so many headaches because the rule depends on how specific the time reference is.
Exactly. It's all about scale. We use at for the most precise points in time, clock times, at 6:30 p.m., at noon, at sunrise. Also, specific moments or short holiday periods, at the moment, at night, and often at Christmas or at Easter, referring to the general holiday time.
Okay, F for points. Then we zoom out slightly for on.
Yes, on is used for specific days and dates. On Monday, on July 4th, on her birthday, on New Year's Day. As soon as you name the day or give the date, you need on.
And in is for the bigger containers of time.
That's a good way to put it. In covers longer, less specific periods. Months in August, seasons in winter, years in 2023, decades in the 1990s, centuries in the 18th century, or even general parts of the day, like in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening, but note at night. A really common error is using on with just a year, like on 1999. Nope, it has to be in 1999.
Okay, at precise, on days, dates, in longer periods. Got it. But time isn't just about points, it's about duration too. How do we handle that? This is crucial for task 1 graphs, right?
Absolutely critical. You need to distinguish between a starting point and a length of time. Since marks the beginning of a period that continues up to the present or a specific past point, usually used with perfect tenses. Sales have increased since January. January is the start. For, on the other hand, measures the total duration, the length of the period. We lived there for 5 years. 5 years is the span.
Right. Since is the from when, for is the how long. What about during?
During specifies that something happens within a particular period, sometime between the beginning and the end. It doesn't usually cover the whole period. He fell asleep during the lecture. Not necessarily for the entire lecture duration. It rained during the night.
Okay. And then there's the by versus until confusion. Deadline versus duration again.
Exactly. We touched on this, but it's worth hammering home. By this indicates a deadline. The action must be completed at or before that specific time. Please submit your application by Friday. Friday is the latest acceptable point. Until or till describes a continuous action or state that continues up to a certain point in time and then stops. The shop is open until 9 p.m. At 9 p.m. it closes. I waited until he arrived. Confusing these in reading or listening, especially with instructions or schedules, can lead to misunderstanding.
Yeah, understanding submit by Friday versus work until Friday is pretty fundamental.
It is. Mastering these time prepositions provides the whole temporal framework for your descriptions and narratives. Hashtag 2.2, place, position, and movement, describing location.
Okay, moving from time to space. The next big function, place, position, and movement. Describing where things are. Again, we see in, on, at, but now defining physical space.
That's right. The logic is similar to time, in a way, for enclosed spaces or larger areas, in the garden in London in the box, for surfaces, on the floor, on the wall, on page 7, and for specific points, addresses or general location sense, at the bus stop, at 42 Oxford Street, at the party, at work.
Now, things get interesting with vertical relationships. We have under, over, below, above. People often use under and below interchangeably. Is there a subtle difference?
There often is, especially in more precise or technical contexts, which can pop up in IELTS reading. Under typically implies something is directly beneath something else, may be covered by it or in contact. The cat is sleeping under the blanket he hid under the table. Below often suggests a lower position on a vertical scale, but not necessarily direct contact or covering. Think measurements, levels, or relative positions. The temperature dropped below 0. Sign your name below the dotted line. From the airplane, we could see the clouds below us, not directly under, just at a lower altitude.
Ah, okay. So below can be more about relative position or level, not always physical covering. That's a useful distinction. What about over versus above? Similar nuance.
Similar, yes. Over can imply movement across something or covering. The plane flew over the city. She put a cloth over the cage. It can also mean more than. Above generally just indicates a higher position, often without movement or covering implied. The lamp hangs above the table. The summit is 1,000 meters above sea level. Again, above is often used for levels or measurements, while over can imply a more direct vertical relationship or movement across. Getting this right adds precision, especially in descriptive tasks.
That's really helpful. These details make a difference. Now let's talk specifically about direction and movement. These seem vital for describing processes or journeys.
Absolutely essential. This group includes words like to, towards, into, onto, out of, off, through, across, along. To indicates the destination or endpoint. We drove to the coast. Towards indicates the direction, but not necessarily reaching the destination. She walked towards the exit, but maybe didn't leave.
Okay, and we already contrasted in and into. What about on and onto?
Same principle. On is static position on a surface. Onto shows the movement to that surface. The book is on the shelf, static. He climbed onto the roof. Movement resulting in being on the roof. Similarly, out of shows movement from inside an enclosed space, get out the car, while off usually shows movement from a surface. Take your feet off the table.
And through, across, along.
Through implies movement within something, from one side or end to the other, often in 3 dimensions. We walk through the forest, the needle goes through the fabric. Across implies movement from one side to the other, usually on a surface or area. He swam across the river. She ran across the field. Along implies movement following a line or path. We strolled along the beach. There are trees planted along the road. Mastering these is key for Task 1 process diagrams, maps, or even describing routes in speaking Part 2. Hashtag 2.3 complex relationships.
Right. Beyond time and place, prepositions establish all sorts of other relationships. Cause, method, possession. These seem crucial for building complex arguments, especially in Task 2 writing.
Definitely. This is where you link ideas logically.
Yeah.
Let's look at cause reason. We already talked about because of common, due to, formal, often linked to a noun after to be, What about owing to? You mentioned that too.
Yes. How does owing to fit in? Is it just another formal option?
It is formal, yes. Often very similar to due to. Some stylists prefer due to only after the verb to be, the closure was due to, and use owing to more freely at the start of a sentence, much like because of, but more formal. Owing to staff shortages, the library will close early. It sounds quite administrative or official. Using due to or owing to correctly, instead of always defaulting to because of, shows you can handle register shifts.
Okay, good to know. Then instrument how something is done. This is where the by versus with distinction comes in again, right?
Yes, and it's a classic error point, especially with passive voice, which is common in academic writing in Task 1. Rule of thumb. By is for the agent, the doer, if mentioned in passive, or the general method mode of transport. The report was written by the committee. I contacted him by email. We traveled by car. With is for the specific tool or instrument used to perform the action. She opened the letter with a knife. He fixed the chair with glue.
So saying the cake was made with my grandmother is wrong because she's the agent, not the tool.
Exactly. It should be made by my grandmother, unless perhaps she was an ingredient, which seems unlikely. Getting by and with correct and passive sentences, the process is completed by machine X using method Y with tool Z, demonstrates real grammatical control.
Right. And finally, possession relation. This seems straightforward with of, but are there others?
Of is the main one for possession, or showing a relationship. The leg of the table, the results of the study, the importance of education. But with can also indicate possession of a feature or accompaniment. A man with red hair, a house with a large garden. Two acts can show connection or belonging. The key to the door, an answer to the question, a contributor to the project. And for send can indicate purpose or intended recipient, linking back to our earlier discussion. A room for guests, a prize for the winner. Understanding how these different prepositions define the relationship between nouns is fundamental to constructing clear and accurate noun phrases, which are the building blocks of complex sentences.
Okay, we've laid out the structures, classified the functions. Seems logical, but English is rarely that simple, is it? Now we get into the real tricky stuff, the exceptions, the idiomatic uses, the pairs that always seem to confuse people. This feels like where Band 7 gets stuck and Band 9 pushes through. Here's where it gets really interesting. These subtle differences, they trip up almost everyone at some point, even native speakers sometimes.
Absolutely. This is where the rules seem to bend, or context becomes king. Mastering these confusing pairs and idioms is a hallmark of genuine fluency and command, not just textbook knowledge. It's about sounding natural.
Let's tackle the first big one. At versus in for place, but in a specific context. The source mentions at school versus in school, or at hospital versus in hospital. What's the deal there? It's not just about being inside the building, is it?
No, it's definitely not just about physical location here. This is pure idiom. If someone is at school or at the hospital, it usually means they are physically present at that location. Maybe they're visiting, working there, or just outside. She met him at the hospital. He's waiting at the school gates. But if someone is in school or in hospital, often without the in British English, it implies they are there for the primary purpose of the institution. In school means studying as a student. In hospital means being treated as a patient. Same for in prison versus at the prison.
Ah, so in callus implies function or status within the institution, while at is more about just the location itself. That's a crucial difference for listening comprehension.
Huge difference. Misinterpreting that could completely change your understanding of a situation described in the listening test.
Okay, next pair. By versus until for time. We know deadline versus duration, but where do people usually mess this up?
A common mistake is trying to use until with completed actions, especially with perfect tenses looking towards the future. You might hear someone say, I will finish the report until 5 p.m. That sounds wrong to a native speaker.
Right, because until implies the activity continues up to that point, but finish is a single point of completion.
Exactly. So if the action is completed by that point, you need by will finish or will have finished the report by 5 p.m. The completion happens at or before the deadline. If you want to use until, the verb needs to reflect ongoing activity. I will work on the report until 5 p.m. Then I stop working. Getting that distinction right, especially in writing task 1 when describing timelines or projections, is key.
Makes sense. Now, 2 versus 4, but focusing on action. Direction transfer versus benefit purpose. How does this play out?
Let's look at verbs of giving or sending. 2 clearly marks the recipient or the destination of the transfer. I sent the email to my manager. The email went to him. She gave the keys to her neighbor. The keys were transferred to the neighbor. For in this context, indicates the intended beneficiary or the purpose behind the action, not necessarily the direct recipient of the transfer itself. I bought these flowers for my mother. She benefits. She's the reason. He booked a ticket for the concert. Purpose. Can you hold this for me on my behalf?
So, I made a cake to my friend would be wrong.
Yes, unless you somehow physically transfer the act of making to them. You'd say, I made a cake for my friend. She's the intended recipient or beneficiary. Mixing 2 and 4 here really confuses the relationship.
Got it. Next, with verse back again, but focusing purely on the action context, instrument versus agent. We touched on passive voice, but let's reinforce it.
Yes, crucial reinforcement. With the tool. By the agent or method. The window is broken with a stone tool. The window is broken by the burglar. A task 1 processes. The sample is heated with a Bunsen burner, tool. The results are then analyzed by the software, agent method. Using with for the agent is a very common error for learners, and it immediately sounds unnatural.
Okay. Now for a pair, that means the same thing, but differs in style. Despite versus in spite of.
Right, both mean although or even though, and are followed by a noun, pronoun, or gerund, acting form. They introduce contrast. Despite the difficulty. In spite of the difficulty, she passed the exam. Same meaning. The main difference is, well, firstly, despite is 1 word, in spite of is 3, so despite is more concise. And secondly, despite is generally considered slightly more formal and is very common, perhaps preferred, in academic and formal writing, like IELTS Task 2, using despite signals that conciseness and formality.
So while both are correct, leaning towards despite in formal writing might be a subtle upgrade.
It often feels that way, yes.
Yeah.
It's sleeker.
Okay. How about the formality ladder, with words meaning related to? About versus regarding versus concerning.
This is all about register. About is the neutral everyday word. Let's talk about the project. Perfectly fine in most situations, including speaking part 1 or 2. Regarding steps up the formality. It's common in business emails, formal discussions, and essays. I am writing regarding the job advertisement. Sounds more professional than writing about. Concerning is often interchangeable with regarding, but can sometimes feel even more formal, occasionally carrying a sense of seriousness or official importance. Think legal notices or formal reports. The committee raised several points concerning the budget proposal. Choosing regarding or concerning over about in writing task 2 or speaking part 3 demonstrates your ability to control register effectively.
Right, showing you can pick the precise word for the context. And the last pair, out of versus from for movement, physical exit versus origin.
Yeah, this can be subtle. Out of 6 specifically emphasizes the movement from an enclosed or defined space. The act of exiting. She took the letter out of the envelope. He walked out of the room. Focuses on leaving the inside. From indicates the starting point or origin of a movement or journey, which might be a place, a person, or even a source. The train from London has arrived. London origin. I received an email from my bank. Bank is source. He just got back from holiday. Holiday location, origin.
So she got out of the car, focuses on the action of exiting the vehicle. She came from the car, sounds a bit odd, maybe implying the car was her point of origin in a broader journey.
Exactly. Came from the car is much less common and implies source rather than exit. Sticking to out of 4 physical exit from enclosed spaces is usually the way to go. Mastering these pairs isn't just about avoiding errors. It's about choosing the word that conveys the exact nuance intended, which is crucial for that Band 9 precision. Okay, so we've done structure, function, exceptions. If we connect this to the bigger picture now, all these details about prepositions, they aren't just abstract grammar points. They become the absolute keys to interpretation and expression right there in the exam room across all 4 modules. We need to see how to apply them strategically. Hashtag 4.1 speaking module practice.
Right. Let's start with speaking. How does nailing prepositions help you there, especially in, say, part 3, where the discussion gets more abstract?
It contributes massively to both fluency and grammatical range and accuracy. And coherence, too. Think about part 1, simple questions about routines. Examiner asks, what do you typically do during the week? End quote. If you reply, on Monday I go to work, in Tuesday also. That little slip, in Tuesday instead of on Tuesday, it's a small error, but it jars. It sounds unnatural immediately. Getting those basic time prepositions at, on, in right for routine talk is fundamental for a smooth start.
Okay, so accuracy in the basics for part 1. What about part 2, the cue card? Often you have to describe a place or an event.
Exactly. Location, sequence, experience. Prepositions are essential. You might need to describe where something was. The cafe was right beside the river, or it was located opposite the main square. Using beside or opposite accurately paints a clearer picture than just near, or describing movement or position. We walked along the path. He was standing in front of the building. Using compound prepositions like onto or out of can also add dynamism. We climbed onto the viewing platform. We stepped out of the noisy street into the quiet courtyard. That shows better vocabulary control.
And part 3, the abstract discussion.
This is where complex relationships, expressed through prepositions, become vital. The examiner might ask about cause and effect, comparisons, opinions. For instance, what are the advantages of living in a big city? You need of, or discussing impact. How does tourism impact on the local environment? Using on correctly shows you understand how to talk about effects. If you said impact to, it would be wrong. Using those formal phrasal prepositions we discussed also shines here. In terms of economic benefits, regarding environmental concerns, despite the challenges, there are opportunities. This structures your abstract arguments effectively. Hashtag 4.2 writing module practice.
Okay, writing. This feels like the place where precision with prepositions is absolutely make or break, especially for the higher bands. Task 1 and Task 2 both demand it.
Absolutely. Let's break it down. Task 1, describing graphs, charts, processes, maps. It's all about accuracy and using the right language to describe data and change. Prepositions of time are crucial. Sales increased steadily from 2010 to 2015, from 10.0 for the range. The figures fluctuated during the first quarter, for the period. By 2020, the number had reached a peak for the endpoint. Movement in comparison too. Profits rose sharply to £5 million, 2 for the destination level. Investment in Sector A remains significantly below Sector B, below for comparison. Water flows from the tank through the filter and into the collection basin, from through into for process stages.
So getting those wrong completely misrepresents the data.
Completely. And it shows a lack of control over the specific language needed for Task 1. Now, Task 2, the essay. This is where your command of more complex and formal prepositions really pays off for your grammatical range and accuracy score. You need to express opinions, views on a topic, reasons, due to, owing to, contrasts, despite, in spite of, purpose, for the purpose of, means, by means of. Using participial prepositions adds sophistication. Considering the arguments presented, regarding the potential solutions, building complex noun phrases often relies on prepositions. The development of renewable energy sources, the need for international cooperation, concerns about the impact of technology on society.
So actively choosing more formal or complex prepositional structures, like using notwithstanding instead of just although, can directly contribute to a higher band score in writing.
Yes, because it demonstrates a wider range and better control over different registers and structures. It shows you're not limited to basic connectors. Examiners look for that ability to manipulate language effectively for academic purposes. Hashtag 4.3, reading and listening modules. Practice interpretation. And it's not just about producing the right prepositions in speaking and writing. It's equally important to understand them accurately in reading and listening. They are often the key to unlocking the meaning.
How so in reading? Don't we just focus on the main vocabulary?
The main words tell you what, but prepositions often tell you where, when, why, or how. They define the relationships. Think about locating information. A text might say, research conducted prior to the main study revealed issues with the methodology. The prepositional phrase prior to the main study tells you exactly when this happened. It's crucial for timeline understanding. Or complex location descriptions, like the example earlier, discovered in a vault underneath the bedrock at the foot of the mountains. You need to process in, underneath, and act correctly to visualize the exact spot.
Right. And for tasks like matching headings.
Prepositions in the headings are huge clues. A heading, like differing attitudes towards technology, tells you the paragraph must discuss various perspectives related to technology. If the paragraph only describes technology itself, the heading doesn't fit. The preposition signals the relationship. Arguments against a proposal versus arguments for a proposal, the preposition changes everything.
Okay, and in listening, prepositions are small, easily missed words. How critical are they there?
They're incredibly critical, especially in gap-fill exercises or multiple-choice questions, where understanding the precise relationship is key. They are high frequency, and the difference between at, on, in, by, until can determine whether you get the answer right. Let's try those quiz examples from the source material, thinking like a listener needing to fill the gap instantly.
Okay. First one. The seminar will be held at the University Hall Friday.
Right. You hear University Hall. That's a specific location used for an event, so it takes at. You hear Friday, a specific day, so it takes on. Instantly, you need at the University Hall on Friday.
Second, please arrive 9 a.m. and bring your ID card to Han.
9 a.m. is a deadline for arrival, so it must be by 9 a.m.
Right.
Bring your ID card. It accompanies you. You use it as an instrument of identification, perhaps, so it's with you. By 9 a.m. with you.
And the last one, reinforcing that duration point. I've lived here,
You
2015.
see the year 2015 and the present perfect, I've lived. This signals a starting point continuing to the present that requires since. Since 2015, if the sentence was about the length of time, say, for X years you'd need for, that since for distinction is tested constantly.
So even in the receptive skills, listening and reading, these tiny words are doing a lot of heavy lifting in terms of meaning. You ignore them at your peril.
Exactly. They aren't just grammatical fluff, they are semantic anchors. Understanding them correctly is just as important as producing them correctly. Hashtag outro. So, to kind of wrap up this deep dive, mastering prepositions for that band 9 really comes down to integrating three key things. First, understanding the classification's simple compound phrasal participles so you have the full toolkit to choose from and can vary your structures. Second, really grasping their function, how they signal time, place, cause, means, and all those relationships, knowing why you're choosing a preposition. And third, crucially, navigating those tricky exceptions in idiomatic pairs, because that's what makes your English sound truly natural and not just correct.
And the key takeaway seems to be consistent, focused practice, but not just memorizing rules. It's about shifting your focus, right?
Mhm.
Thinking about the purpose of the word, the relationship it's building in that specific context. When you start doing that instinctively, that's when your answers, both spoken and written, start to sound really fluent and precise, and that's what gets you the high band score.
Absolutely. And remember that final point about register we discussed, the conscious choice between, say, an everyday word like about and a more formal one like regarding or concerning. That choice has power. It changes the perceived authority and sophistication of your communication. That control over register is something examiners definitely notice and reward at the highest levels.
Okay, so here's something for you, the listener, to think about. A final challenge. Go find a paragraph you've written recently, maybe an IELTS practice essay, maybe even just a formal email. Look closely at every simple preposition you use. Look at your conjunctions like although or because. Now ask yourself, can I upgrade any of these? Could that although become despite or notwithstanding? Could that about become regarding? Could because of be elevated to, due to, or owing to if the context fits? Just try making those strategic swaps. See how it changes the feel, the academic weight of your writing. It's a really practical way to start applying these ideas.
It really is. Start experimenting with those more complex tools. Use the distinctions we've talked about today to consciously elevate your sentence structures. You'll quickly find that these seemingly small words carry enormous weight. They can be the difference that pushes you into those top IELTS bands. Thanks for diving deep with us today.